The mining station on planet Virex 9 was always quiet during the night shift. Most workers slept, trusting the machines to do the work. Only one human stayed awake in the control room, watching the screens. His name was Darren, a low-level technician. With messy hair and tired eyes, he didn't complain about the boring hours because silence was better than chaos. That night, something strange happened. A red light blinked on the communication console. Darren leaned forward, surprised. The signal wasn't from the surface, and not from any of the satellites either. It came from deep underground, far below the station's safe zones. He turned up the volume, listening closely. The sound was broken, filled with static, but a voice was hidden inside. "Help. Please, underground. Baby. Monster." The voice was soft and shaky, like someone crying. Darren's eyes widened. "Is this a prank?" he whispered to himself. He replayed the recording again and again. It was clearly an alien voice, feminine, scared, and full of pain. Nobody else had noticed the signal. Not even the auto alerts. It was too weak for the system to recognize it as real. He checked the location of the source. It was an old part of the tunnels, shut down 10 years ago after a cave-in. No one was supposed to be alive down there. But Darren couldn't ignore the voice. It reminded him of someone begging for help and being ignored. He thought for a moment. If he told the station commander, they'd laugh or punish him for wasting time. Just a ghost signal, they'd say. So he made a decision. He would send a drone into the tunnels. Secretly, Darren picked a small scout drone from the tech room. He powered it up, linked it to his wrist pad, and quietly opened the old hatch leading down. The cold air hit his face, thick with dust and age. He sent the drone flying ahead, its lights cutting through the darkness. The tunnel walls were cracked and covered in strange marks. He watched the screen as the drone flew deeper. Nothing at first, just rock and silence. Then, something moved. A figure, a thin shape, barely lit by the drone's light, sitting against the wall. She looked weak, pale, and trembling. Darren leaned closer to the screen. The alien girl slowly turned her head toward the drone. Her eyes were wide and full of fear. Her lips moved. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered just as the drone signal began to fade. The screen went black. "No, no, no," Darren hissed, trying to reboot the connection. But the drone had been destroyed. Something had knocked it out of the air. He saved the last image. It captured. It showed the alien girl reaching out, her body curled protectively around her swollen belly. She was pregnant. Darren sat in silence, his heart racing. The words echoed in his head. "Help. Baby. Monster." Was she part of some secret experiment? How did she survive underground, and what happened to her? He looked at the locked hatch leading to the lower tunnels. He couldn't sleep. All night he stared at the image. Her terrified eyes burned into his memory. By morning, Darren made his decision. He would go down there himself, even if it meant breaking rules. He had to find her, because no one else would, and deep beneath the surface, something in the shadows moved. It watched the last light from the drone vanish. It knew someone was coming, and it was ready. Darren waited until the station was asleep. The shift guards were lazy and didn't check the tunnels much. He packed a small bag, water, scanner, flare, a shock baton just in case. He wore a gray utility suit and kept his wrist pad tight on his arm. The signal from the alien girl still echoed in his mind. He opened the hatch slowly, metal creaking loud in the silence. The air inside was thick and cold, like something forgotten. As he climbed down the ladder, the light from his helmet cut through layers of dust. The walls were covered in old warnings. Biohazard, do not enter, sealed by order. 12. But Darren didn't stop. The tunnel bent sharply after 50 meters. He followed the scanner, which still picked up a weak life form. Each step echoed through the metal floor like a drumbeat in a grave. He reached the lower chamber, dark, silent, and wet. Pipes were broken and water dripped slowly from above. He moved forward, pushing open a half-bent metal door. Inside was a collapsed hallway with broken lights, but his wrist pad beeped louder. He was close. Then, he saw her. The alien girl was curled beside a broken control panel, her back against the wall. She looked up in shock as his light fell on her face. She had purple-tinted skin, silver eyes, and long white hair that looked dirty and tangled. Her body trembled and her belly was round. Too round. Darren raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "I heard your call." Her eyes filled with tears, her lips moved, but her voice was weak. "You, human. Not like them." Darren knelt beside her and handed her a water pouch. She drank with shaking hands, barely able to hold it. "My name is Darren," he whispered. "What's yours?" She blinked slowly. "Lyra." Darren checked her pulse, fast but steady. The skin on her belly glowed faintly, almost like something inside was moving. "What happened to you?" he asked. Lyra looked away, tears running down her cheeks. "They took me. Injected. Dream sleep. Woke up like this." She clutched, her belly, fear in her voice. Something grew inside. Not natural. Not right. Darren felt cold inside. This wasn't just a prisoner. She was a victim of something worse. Some kind of twisted experiment. He glanced around and saw broken machines, shattered pods, and loose wires sparking gently. This place was a lab once, but now it looked like a crime scene. He spotted claw marks on the walls and deep scratches in the floor. Something violent had been here. "We need to get out of here," Darren said. "Can you walk?" She tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. He helped her up, letting her lean on him, but just as they turned to leave, a loud noise echoed down the hall. Clang. Darren froze, listening. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Lyra's eyes went wide. It's awake," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What is?" "The monster. The one they used. To make this," she said, pointing to her stomach. Darren's blood ran cold. Before he could speak, the tunnel lights flickered. Then a soft mechanical voice played from an old speaker above them. "System wake initiated. Specimen chamber 3 releasing in 5 minutes." Lyra grabbed his sleeve tightly. "We have to go now," she cried. Darren helped her move as fast as they could. They found another hallway, this one less damaged, but the walls here were covered in strange symbols and dried blood. The scanner on his wrist pad beeped again. Another life form was nearby. Then they heard it. Not a voice, but a low breathing sound, like a huge animal sniffing the air. Lyra panicked, falling to her knees. "It smells the child," she whispered. "It's hunting us." Darren pulled her back up. "We're not dying down here," he said firmly. "We're getting out." At the end of the hall was a steel door half opened by force. Darren pushed it wider and pulled Lyra through. Inside was a hidden chamber, untouched and still working. Old emergency lights glowed dimly, and a medical bed stood in the center. He laid her down gently, locking the door behind them. Lyra cried softly as she clutched her belly. Outside, the breathing sound grew louder, closer. Something scratched against the metal. Slowly, curiously, it had found them. The hidden chamber was colder than the tunnels. Soft red lights hummed from the walls, still running after all these years. Darren looked around, trying to find something useful, anything that could help. Lyra lay on the medical bed, holding, her belly breathing slow but painful. She looked at him with tired eyes. "This was where they changed me," she whispered. Darren checked a console nearby, surprised that it still worked. He wiped dust off the screen and started flipping through logs. The files were old, corrupted, but some entries still opened. Project, name, Breeder 9. His heart sank as he read the descriptions. Alien females of different species were captured and forced into artificial sleep. Genetic material was mixed, part alien, part unknown, even some from human sources. The goal was clear, to grow something powerful, something new. Darren turned to Lyra. "They experimented on you," he said quietly. She nodded. "I was a peace envoy, kidnapped during travel. Woke up here months later. She pointed to a scar on her neck. That's where they injected the serum. Her hands shook as she touched her belly again. I can feel it. It's not just a child. It thinks. He looked at the next file. Test subject. L7 status. Pregnancy stable. Hybrid development at 92%. Mental link forming. That was her. L7 must be Lyra. She was carrying the most advanced hybrid they ever created, but it wasn't the only one. He found more entries, subjects before her. Most failed. Some died in violent ways. One entry showed an escape. Specimen Alpha 3 broke free during testing and killed the research team. Status: uncontained. Possibly still in Sector 7. Darren looked up at the door. That was where the breathing came from. Sector 7 wasn't empty. The Alpha was still alive and it had been waiting. Suddenly the lights flickered again. A sharp bang echoed from the tunnel, something hitting the steel door hard. Lyra flinched, covering her belly. It knows I'm alive, she said, voice shaking. It remembers me. Darren moved to the supply cabinet and found an old stun gun, half-charged. The banging stopped, replaced by silence. Then, the sound of claws dragging across the walls, slow and scratching. Darren felt the fear crawl up his back. He checked. The map on the console. There was an emergency shaft nearby, a narrow maintenance tunnel that might still be open. He helped Lyra up again. We have to move now, he said. She struggled to stand, the weight of her belly slowing her. But she forced herself forward, teeth clenched. Darren carried her when she stumbled. They reached the side door and opened it carefully. The tunnel beyond was tight, filled with hanging wires and old pipes. Darren squeezed through first, then helped pull Lyra behind him. Halfway through, they heard it. A low, gurgling growl. The Alpha had found the chamber and it was angry. It smashed the medical bed, tore into the walls. Its screech echoed through the shaft, sending dust raining down on them. Go, Darren shouted, pushing faster. But Lyra cried out. She fell, grabbing her belly. It's starting, she gasped. The baby. It's coming. No, not now, Darren said, panic in his voice. He pulled her into a corner of the shaft. Where the tunnel widened, there was no room to run. He laid her down gently, placing his jacket under her head. Lyra was breathing fast now, in pain, but alert. You'll have to help, she said, her voice low but steady. I've never done this, Darren whispered. You must, she replied, or it will die, or I will. He nodded, hands shaking, wiping sweat from his forehead. Outside, the Alpha screeched again. It was searching for them, breaking through old metal like it was paper. Inside the shaft, time moved differently, slower, heavier. Lyra screamed, and Darren helped as best he could. Blood, light, and strange glowing energy filled the small space. Then silence. The child was born. It didn't cry. It blinked, looked around, and reached out to Lyra with three-fingered hands. Its skin was smooth, a mix of her color and something else. But its eyes, they were completely human. Lyra cried as she held the baby close. It's alive. And it's not a monster, she said softly. But Darren turned. The sound of the Alpha's claws was getting closer again. And now, it wasn't just hunting Lyra. It was hunting its rival. The baby was wrapped in Darren's jacket, quiet and alert. Its strange eyes moved slowly, watching every flicker of light in the tunnel. Lyra held it close to her chest, still breathing heavily, her body weak from the birth. Darren looked both ways down the shaft, but there was no time to rest. The Alpha was coming, and the tunnel was too narrow to fight. We need to move, Darren said quickly. He helped Lyra stand again, supporting her weight with one arm while holding the shock baton in the other. The baby didn't cry. It only looked around with eerie, calm. Its glowing eyes reminded Darren of the lab screens, of experiments that had gone too far. But somehow, this child felt different. They moved deeper into the maintenance shaft, the walls shaking now with every step of the creature behind them. Old pipes burst from the ceiling, leaking steam and water. Darren cursed under his breath. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a trap. The Alpha was driving them forward, forcing them somewhere. Lyra's legs gave out again, and Darren caught her before she fell. I can't go farther, she whispered. Yes, you can, he said, voice firm. I'll carry you. He lifted her with effort, keeping the child secure between them. Her head rested on his shoulder as he pushed on. Then the scanner on his wrist lit up. Exit shaft 300 meters. Hope sparked in Darren's chest. If they reached that shaft, they could climb back toward the surface. But the ground trembled again, this time stronger. A massive crash behind. Them sent dust and debris flying. The Alpha had smashed through the steel wall and was charging. Darren ran, heart pounding. He could hear it, sharp claws on metal, wet breathing, growls that didn't sound fully animal. Lyra opened her eyes, barely holding on. Don't let it touch the child, she whispered. I won't, Darren growled, gripping the baton tighter. They reached the end of the shaft, only to find the ladder collapsed. Twisted metal blocked the emergency escape. Darren looked up at the broken opening, the top barely visible. A narrow vent to the side was the only way left. Small, dangerous, but maybe possible. He looked down at the baby, still calm. Then he looked at Lyra, pale and silent now. Can you fit through that? He asked her. She nodded slowly without speaking. He handed her the baby, then crawled into the vent first to clear the way. It was tight, his shoulders scraping the sides. The air was hot, full of dust and the scent of oil. He pulled himself forward, then reached back. Give me the child, he said. She passed the baby forward, then followed, crawling slowly. Suddenly, the vent behind them groaned. The Alpha had reached the shaft. It roared, the sound shaking the walls. Its massive arms smashed into the tunnel, claws slashing wildly. One blow hit the vent just inches behind Lyra's feet. She screamed, pulling forward as Darren reached for her hand. Come on, he shouted. She crawled faster, her body scraping against sharp edges. The child never cried, its eyes only glowed brighter in the darkness. Then a claw slammed again, this time tearing a hole in the side of the vent. Hot air burst through, and the force knocked Darren and Lyra against the walls. He shielded the baby as debris rained down. Smoke filled the tunnel, burning their eyes and lungs. Keep going, Darren coughed. They pushed forward until they reached the final grate. He kicked it open, pulling Lyra and the baby out. They collapsed in a small maintenance room, the vent caving behind them. For a moment, silence returned. Darren sat against the wall, chest heaving. Lyra cradled the baby again, whispering softly in her language. But the peace didn't last. The walls groaned again. The Alpha was still following, even through smoke and steel. It would not stop, not until it reclaimed what it believed was its offspring. Darren stood up, fists clenched. We can't run forever, he said. He looked around the room and saw broken tools, old energy panels, cracked fuses. An idea formed in his mind, a trap. We fight here, he said. I'll end this. Lyra looked up at him, her face full of fear. Don't die, she whispered. He smiled faintly, not planning on it. Then he started building the final stand. Because above all, this child, whatever it was, deserved to live free, and he wasn't going to let some monster take that away. The small maintenance room smelled of rust and old wires. Darren moved quickly, gathering broken panels, cracked batteries, and a sparking fuse unit. He worked with urgency. Every second brought the monster closer. Lyra sat in the corner, weak, but awake, gently rocking the baby in her arms. The child still didn't cry, only watched with strange, glowing eyes. Darren didn't speak much. He was building a trap, a desperate one, using the broken fuses in the room's power supply. He rigged the walls with surge nodes. If the Alpha stepped in, it would trigger a high-voltage burst. It might not kill the creature, but it could slow it down. Lyra watched him silently. Her face was pale, her arms tired, but her eyes burned. With fear, she glanced down at the baby. Its small hands reached toward her as if sensing her pain. She leaned in close and whispered softly, "You're not him. You're not a monster." Darren checked the trap one last time. "Lyra," he said, "when I give the signal, You run through that service tunnel behind you. She nodded slowly, but her voice was weak. What if it doesn't work? He gave her a tired smile. Then I buy you time. She didn't like that answer, but she understood. The ground trembled again. The Alpha was near, its claws scraped against metal as it sniffed the air, following the scent of its hybrid child. Then came the screech, louder, angrier, full of hunger and rage. Darren stood near the trigger line, baton ready in one hand. The wall exploded inward. A massive shadow entered, 8 feet tall, part reptile, part insect, with glowing veins and too many eyes. It stepped slowly, sniffing the air, its head tilting, like a curious predator. Then it saw the child, its movements froze. It growled softly, but not like before. Lyra, go, Darren shouted. She didn't move at first, frozen in fear. Now! He yelled again. That snapped her out of it. She clutched the baby and crawled into the service tunnel behind her. The Alpha's eyes followed her, but Darren stepped forward, shouting, waving the baton. Over here, you freak! The monster turned its head sharply, growling again. It stepped directly into the trap. Darren hit the switch. Electricity burst through the floor and walls. The Alpha screamed in pain, its body thrashing against the current. Sparks lit the room. Like lightning, Darren fell back, shielding his face from the heat. Then silence. Smoke filled the room. The Alpha lay still, its body twitching, burnt skin peeling. Darren didn't wait. He ran through the tunnel after Lyra. The path twisted and turned. He followed her footprints, the air growing colder. Then he found her at the end of the passage, sitting against the wall, cradling the child. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. Is it over? She asked. Darren didn't know how to answer. He was about to speak when the ground shook again. A growl echoed from the tunnel behind them, low, weak, but alive. No, he whispered. It's not over. Lyra held the baby close, her hands trembling, but something was different now. The child reached out, its tiny fingers glowing. It touched Lyra's face, then Darren's. Both of them felt a wave pass through their minds. Soft, like a whisper. They could feel peace. Darren looked into the baby's eyes, and in that moment, he realized something. This child wasn't just a mix of monster and alien. It had something else, something human. It could think, feel, and connect. It's trying to calm us, Darren said slowly. It knows we're afraid. Lyra nodded, amazed. I can feel its thoughts, she whispered. It doesn't want to hurt anyone. Another roar echoed, but it was distant. The Alpha was weakening, dying slowly from the electric surge, but it was still coming, and it was calling for the child. Lyra looked at Darren, her face filled with pain and fear. We can't run anymore, she said. I have to protect him. Darren took a deep breath and made a decision. There's one way left, he said, pointing to an old elevator shaft nearby. It leads to the surface, but it's broken. We'll have to climb. He found a half-functioning pulley system, barely holding together. I'll go first, and pull you up one by one. She didn't argue. He helped her into the harness, wrapped the baby securely to her chest, then began pulling, inch by inch. The elevator groaned, cables squeaked, but it moved. Darren's muscles burned, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Not now. Below. The Alpha let out one final roar, then silence. As the elevator reached the top, Darren collapsed on the platform, gasping for air. Lyra reached out, helping him stand. Behind them, the old shaft collapsed forever. They had made it, but the true journey had only just begun. The surface air felt different, thinner, colder, but alive. Darren, Lyra, and the child stood just outside the rusted old hatch that led back to the station. Behind them, smoke still curled from the ruined shaft. The Alpha's last roar had faded, but Darren didn't trust silence anymore. Lyra held the child tight, her eyes scanning the rocky horizon. The station loomed ahead, dark under the pale. Green sky, no alarms, no lights, no guards. It looked abandoned, but Darren knew better. They weren't alone. He guided Lyra toward the side entrance, using his clearance card to bypass the old security lock. The door opened with a heavy hiss. Inside, the halls were quiet. Too quiet, Darren whispered. Stay close. They walked through metal corridors, past storage rooms and dusty control panels. The power was low, systems flickering in and out. Darren checked a terminal near the emergency hub. It beeped once and displayed an old warning. Bioweapon alert. Containment breached. He froze, staring at the screen. It wasn't just you, he whispered. There were more. Lyra's grip on the child tightened. You mean other hybrids? Darren nodded. Or copies of the Alpha. Maybe worse. His stomach turned as he read another message. Specimen activity detected in Sector 4. That was just below them. Suddenly they heard footsteps. Not loud, but careful. Echoing in the empty station, Darren raised the baton again, motioning for Lyra to hide behind a crate. He peeked around the corner. It wasn't a monster. It was Commander Luthen, a tall, cold-eyed man in a black uniform. He walked with purpose and was flanked by 2 guards. Darren's blood ran cold. This was the man who shut down the lower tunnels years ago. And now he was here, armed and alert. Do not engage the subject directly, Luthen said to his men. If the hybrid child is alive, it must be secured. Darren ducked back, heart racing. They know, he whispered to Lyra. They've been watching the lab all along. They want the baby, she said, voice trembling. Darren looked at the child. It stared back. Silently, its skin shimmered slightly under the station's dull light. It wasn't just part monster, it was something new. Something powerful. We can't let them take him, Darren said. He knew there was only one path left. Confrontation. He guided Lyra to an old storage room and handed her a flare. If anything happens to me, run to the evac shuttle bay, light this flare, and wait. Lyra didn't argue this time. She only said, come back. Darren stepped into the corridor just as Luthen turned the corner. Stop right there, the commander said sharply. Darren raised his hand slowly. I know what you did down there, he said, voice firm. You created a monster, and now you want to raise another. Luthen narrowed his eyes. The child is not yours, he said coldly. It belongs to the program. Darren shook his head. It belongs to her, to life, not your twisted lab. Luthen gave the signal, and one of the guards raised a rifle. But before he could fire, the lights flickered. Then a loud noise echoed through the floor, a deep screech, familiar, deadly. The Alpha was not dead. Darren's eyes widened. Luthen spun around, shouting commands. From the vent behind them, a shadow burst forward. The Alpha crashed into the hallway. Broken but still alive, its body was burned and damaged, but rage gave it strength. The guards opened fire, but the bullets only made it angrier. It swatted one guard into the wall, snapping his spine. The second screamed before it dragged him into the darkness. Luthen turned to Darren, eyes furious. You led it here. No, Darren said. You made it. He ran back to the storage room and slammed the door behind him. Lyra stood up, fear on her face. We have to go, he shouted. He grabbed her hand and led her through the back tunnels toward the shuttle. Bay alarms finally began to blare. Security breach, evacuate immediately. Red lights flashed, doors opened and closed. The base was waking up, but it was already too late. Darren reached the shuttle bay, slamming the door behind them. They climbed into the last evac shuttle. Darren fired up the engines as the Alphas. Screech echoed through the vents above. The child, now glowing with strange light, looked toward the ceiling and, for the first time, made a sound. A soft hum. It was like music, but ancient and powerful. The Alpha paused, its claws scraped the wall slowly, confused. Then it let out one final roar, long, angry, and alone. Darren hit the launch button, and the shuttle blasted. Into the sky they had escaped. But Darren knew the story wasn't over. This child was more than a secret. He was a test, and the real battle was yet to come. The shuttle soared through the green-tinted sky. Below, the dying lab sank into silence, buried in dust and shadows. Darren sat beside Lyra in the small escape pod, his hands trembling as he guided the ship toward orbit. Lyra cradled the baby close to her chest, humming softly to calm it. The child blinked slowly, still glowing faintly with that quiet inner light. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The hum of the engine was the only sound, steady and warm. Darren finally broke the silence. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. Lyra looked at him, then down at the baby. "Yes," she whispered. "He's not like others. He understands things, even feelings." Darren nodded slowly. "It's like he sees into us." He looked at the child and smiled sadly. Poor kid never got a choice. The child stared at Darren, then reached out one small glowing hand and touched his arm. In that moment, Darren felt a rush of memories, not his own. Pain, hunger, fear, but also warmth, love, and curiosity. He gasped, pulling back gently. "He shared something with me," Darren said, shocked. "He's learning. Fast." The shuttle beeped as it reached orbit. Ahead of them, the main human space station floated quietly. Darren opened a channel. "Escape Shuttle 9, requesting emergency dock," he said. "We have survivors and a newborn hybrid." The silence was long. Then a voice responded, "Copy, Shuttle 9, approach Bay 2, prepare for decontamination and medical inspection." Darren sighed. "Here we go." Lyra squeezed his hand. "No matter what happens. Thank you." As they docked, medical teams in white suits rushed in. They scanned Lyra and the child carefully, unsure whether to be afraid or amazed. One medic whispered, "It's part human." Another replied, "And part something we don't even have on record." Darren stayed close to Lyra, refusing to leave her side. Soon, they were moved to a private quarantine room, bright lights, cold walls and too many eyes behind glass. Doctors asked questions, officers recorded everything. Darren told them the truth, but he could see they didn't believe it all. Genetic fusion, rogue AI experiments, ancient DNA. It sounded like a mad story. Lyra stayed silent most of the time. She only spoke when asked directly and only about the child. "He's not dangerous," she said firmly. "He's just a baby." But the officials weren't sure. To them, he was a threat, a mystery, a possible weapon. That night, as the lights dimmed and silence returned, Darren sat beside Lyra's bed. The child rested peacefully, glowing gently in her arms. "I think they'll try to take him," Darren said, voice low. Lyra nodded. "They won't understand him." Darren looked at her. "Then we protect him. Together." The next day, something strange happened. A message arrived from deep space, an alien signal, clean and direct. It came from Lyra's homeworld, long thought disconnected from human roots. The message was short but clear. "We received the child's thoughts. We know he is alive. He is not alone." The scientists panicked. How did they receive a signal? No device was active. Darren already knew the answer. The child had sent it, without machines, through thought, through emotion, through connection. And now, the galaxy knew. The child wasn't just a test subject. He was a bridge, the first of a new kind. Lyra cried softly as she read the message. "My people. They're coming." That night, Darren stood on the station's viewing deck. Stars stretched forever in every direction. He looked at the reflection beside him, Lyra holding the baby. "He deserves a name," Darren said. She smiled gently. "Darrow?" "Darrow," Darren repeated. "That's perfect." A soft beep came from the intercom. "Commander requests your presence in conference room 4. Darren sighed. "It begins." In the meeting room, humans and alien diplomats sat across the table. They all argued. About science, about law, about fear. Some wanted to study Darrow. Some wanted to protect him. Others wanted him locked away. Darren stood up and raised his voice. "He's not a danger," he said. "He's hope." The room fell silent. "He connects species. He feels what we feel. He understands even though he was born in darkness." Lyra stepped forward too. "My people are not enemies. But if you take him from us, we will not stay silent." The message was clear. In the end, the council voted. Darrow would stay with his mother. He would not be a lab sample, not a weapon. He would grow, free, under careful watch, yes, but with dignity, a new life, a new path. Months passed. Darren became Darrow's protector. Guide, and maybe even something like a father, Lyra recovered her strength, her laughter returned. And Darrow, he walked early, spoke without speaking, and dreamed of stars. They were a strange family, but they were whole. And as the ship prepared for its journey to Lyra's homeworld, Darren looked at the stars one last time. He smiled. It all started with a weak signal, he whispered, and it ended with a voice the whole galaxy could hear.